Good evening, everyone. We're going to kick off now. And thank you so much for keeping yourself muted and for having your camera off. We are going to be recording this evening, and this video will be put onto our YouTube channel. So firstly, thank you so much for being here this evening and joining our next CF Live event. This is the CF Exercise Live as part of our nutrition series. My name is Nicole. I am part of the CF Trust, part of the social media team. I also have cystic fibrosis myself, and I'm also a yoga teacher. It will be a really great evening talking to our lovely group of panelists about all things exercise and nutrition. We've got some really interesting information to share with you. We're going to be starting with a presentation and then followed by a discussion with a Q&A at the end if we have time. So if you do have any questions throughout, do try and pop them in the chat below, and at the end of the event we will see if we have time to answer any of your questions. So what I'm going to do now is let the panelists introduce themselves one by one, so you just get to know who we all are. So Darren, would you like to kick us off?
Hi everyone, I'm Darren Sills. I'm a dietitian for adults with CF in Nottingham. My interest is in sports, from a background in sports science before becoming a dietitian.
Thank you. Elizabeth, do you want to go next?
Hi, so I'm Liz. I'm a paediatric dietitian. I work at Great Ormond Street and I've worked in CF for about 15 years. And my area of interest is body composition.
And Kieran?
Hi everyone, so I'm Kieran. I've got cystic fibrosis myself. I've also got a master's degree in nutritional therapy, and I'm a level 3 qualified personal trainer. And for the last 2 years, I've basically been coaching clients, mostly online, to improve their body composition, performance, and health. And then a little bit about me: I grew up vegetarian, and for the last 4 years, I've been vegan as well. Exercise and nutrition plays a massive part in I'm looking forward to this live.
Yeah, no, we've got a great group of panelists all going to share their own experiences and information. But as I said, we're going to start with a presentation, and that's going to be from Liz and Darren. So I'd like to pass it over to you if you want to get your slides ready.
Hi, thanks everyone for joining, and thank you to the team at the CF Trust for supporting tonight's webinar. So Darren and myself, we hope this will be relevant to you, whether you're doing recreational sort of physical activities or training at a high level for competitions. So I will start by just giving a very brief overview of the benefits of physical activity and exercise in CF, look at the role of body composition, and then I'll hand over to Darren, who will talk about the role of nutrition, and then we'll give some practical advice for eating and drinking, and also when to eat and drink when doing sports, and then some additional considerations such as sports supplements. So firstly, why are both physical activity and exercise important for people with CF? And as you probably know, there are many benefits which really are beneficial for the whole body. And just to sort of really define that physical activity is any bodily movement that uses energy, and exercise is obviously more structured. For children, the advice is for sort of 60 minutes of moderate to vigorous activity a day, and for adults it's 30 minutes, sort of 5 days a week, including some strength training. And really it's very much important for promoting lung strength and improving lung function, and also muscle mass, which particularly we're looking at aerobic exercise to increase your fitness, making it easier to do daily activities. And then it's a resistance strength training that helps to build the muscle strength in the tissues around the lungs and in the, around the other organs as well. And also we're looking at strengthening bones as well, particularly sort of through childhood, and then to maintain that into adulthood. I think many people, since starting the modulator, particularly Trio, have seen an increase in their energy levels, and for some people have perhaps gained excess weight, and therefore exercise can actually help maintain a steady weight and avoid excess weight gain. And also it can also help to stabilize blood sugars or blood glucose control, And as well as the physical benefits, it can also improve and optimize really sort of quality of life and well-being. So really it's all round. And this is just to show you the latest figures from the CF Trust registry data, the annual report from last year, and just to sort of show you where the nutritional status is of both adults and children in the UK. We have the chart for adults on the left and children on the right. And this is just the body mass index, or BMI, which is a commonly used marker of nutritional status in both the registry data and in studies, many trials. And you can see that for both adults and for children, we are reaching, if not exceeding, the age and sex-specific targets that are set. So really, you can see that the nutritional status across the UK population is actually good for many, not for all, and I think that's an area that we'll touch on. But I think also the goals really are to maintain, more so to maintain weight and BMI in adults rather than necessarily increase, but also for children to maintain their weight and BMI trajectory. However, these don't give the full picture, and the BMI doesn't tell us the whole picture. So I'll come on to a little bit more about body composition in a moment. You can see here that the trend in the adults, this is the last 3 years from 2018, you can see that there's an increasing proportion of people who are overweight with a higher BMI, and less people with that sort of underweight and lower BMI, decreasing as the years are going on, again, in all the age categories. So moving on to body composition, again, BMI doesn't tell you the whole picture, and actually it's what the weight is actually made up of in terms of the actual body tissues of muscle and fat. And actually they're important because they actually have different impacts on health outcomes. So two people, for example, in this picture may have the same body mass index, but actually have very different ratios of fat and muscle mass, which affects their health differently. Why is it important in cystic fibrosis? Well, it's been shown in studies in both adults and in children that the muscle mass, or lean body mass, more, often referred to, is actually more strongly associated with lung function than the BMI is, and also other clinical outcomes such as bone density as well. So it gives more detail than just the weight and BMI alone. And typically you may have somebody who has a seemingly normal body mass index, but they may have quite low muscle mass stores, and that could actually negatively influence their lung function. It's helpful to track changes in individuals, particularly when starting or changing an exercise regime and doing different types of exercise. So it's quite a nice motivational, well, I say good motivational tool for individuals to track their progress. And it's something we're using more in practice. And it takes away the focus on just looking at weight alone. And it's really starting to help sort of tailor our diet and nutrition and exercise advice that we're giving in our clinics. So these are some of the common sort of quick and simple sort of techniques that you may be familiar with at your centre. These are measures that can be repeated as often as needed. The first is a bioelectrical impedance analysis, which predicts fat and muscle mass by, and it actually sort of measures throughout the whole body, and it can be used to track the direction of change of either muscle or fat mass. We may do arm or hip waist circumference or skin fold measurements. These are just tape measurements on a region of the body, so it doesn't give the whole body composition of the whole body, but just that area. So it's not necessarily as doesn't give as much information as some other methods, but quite easy to do if it's repeated by the same person. And then finally, hand grip strength. Again, you may be used to this in your centre, often using older children and adults because of the weight of the device. And that's a helpful measure of muscle strength if done repeatedly. And all are useful ways of tracking the body composition or predictions of body composition in individuals. And just to sort of show what we're doing in practice at the moment, this is just some brief information about a survey that we carried out last month in our UK dietitians group. It's an online survey, 36 centres have provided responses just to show what we're starting to do in our clinics. And you can see that the bioelectrical impedance is at the moment the most common method that's starting to be used. And this year as a group, we're going to start working on resources, looking at how we interpret the information and what we can do to help support doing this in practice, and how often as well. So just finally, before I hand over to Darren, these are just two quotations from the Exeter Activity Unlimited sort of consensus statements that were published last year. And it really just highlights how important it is for individuals' energy and fluid requirements to be personalised, and also that the exercise and diet plan should really be discussed with your medical team in terms of doctor, physios, dietitians, just to make sure that individual kind of targets and goals are met. And we sort of make sure we're sort of tailoring it appropriately. And now I'll just hand over to Darren. Hopefully this will work.
Hopefully, there we go. I think it is. That's moved on slides. So just adding on to that comment as well, actually, the advice that we offer today really is based on evidence for people without CF. The evidence for people with CF is pretty poor in terms of the type of foods to eat for exercise and for sports, or for any kind of elite level exercise. So the best thing to do is find somebody with specific sports backgrounds to help advise personally if you're at a higher level than just generic everyday run-of-the-mill type exercise. So I'm going to start to touch on the foods for exercise in general. We think of those as carbohydrates, proteins and fats as the big food groups, and I'll start to talk about those a little bit, but also fluids and the smaller nutrients that we call micronutrients. Hopefully this will move on. There we go. So carbohydrates, we tend to put those into two categories. Complex carbohydrates, sometimes people call those starchy carbs. They're things that give us our energy longer duration. They are absorbed more slowly. They show up in our bloodstream as sugar more slowly. And these are foods that you'd eat that make up the bulk of meals. Carbohydrates are generally things like pasta, rice, potatoes, cereals and breads, and generally as part of just healthy balanced diet, we would recommend whole grain versions of those. And they're broken down into simple sugars, but we can also eat in our diets simple sugars. So we think of that as just sugar you'd add to food, glucose syrups, fructose syrups, honeys that are added to foods and added to processed foods as well. The sugar that we find in fruits are simple sugars. They do take a bit more digestion and breaking down because they're within cells, but essentially are the same. And then sports gels and sports bars. The reasons why we need these is that we need to fuel our exercise. We need to fuel just daily living. And that comes from carbohydrates being broken down into simple, usable forms, which our bodies, our muscles and brains can use to function. We do have a storage system for them as well. We store carbohydrates in chains that our bodies create themselves, called glycogen, within muscles and within the liver. It's one of the reasons we say to break a fast. Your liver uses up carbohydrates overnight. So in the morning when we wake up, we should sort of refuel that, re-energize that rechargeable battery of our liver. If you're exercising, it also needs regularly topping up. So throughout the day, we'll talk about the timing of foods later, but we recommend carbohydrates are taken before exercise and afterwards to refuel. Our muscles are really thirsty for carbohydrates after exercise, so we'd recommend getting something in, and we'll talk about the sort of foods and specifics a little bit later on. If you don't get enough of these, some people talk about hitting the wall in things like marathons. That can happen, so this is why you need those. And if you're doing prolonged exercise, probably longer than an hour, then would recommend having a way to get in some additional carbohydrates, some of those simple sugars. If you're doing long distance, long duration, where you're out and about and you can't get access to food, sports bars and gels have the benefits there. It could be just simple. If it's something just over an hour, you could just have an isotonic drink, a Lucozade Sport, or I do talk about a little bit of those later on as well. Moving on, protein. Our bodies are made up of proteins. We need those to build muscle and to repair muscle. So even if your goal isn't to develop muscle, actually you need to repair muscles that damage during exercise. So you do need these foods. But just a little bit of word of caution, magazines will recommend eating far more protein than is recommended. More protein, if you're trying to gain muscle, more protein to an extent doesn't equal more muscle. If somebody's trying to gain muscle, you need calories first, you need energy first, and the an adequate amount of protein to do that. And for some people, it could be as low as 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight a day, up to probably a maximum in the research. It seems to be about 1.6 for adults, 1.6 grams per kilogram. So actually you don't need masses. Lots of the magazines and the products that are marketed will market those same numbers, but per pound of body weight, and you don't need that much. It's just too much. You'll burn it as calories, and you'll be wasting money on those products. You can get all the protein that you need, whether that's from meats or fish, dairy and eggs. But if you're also somebody who's vegan or vegetarian, you can get enough protein with a bit of thought around your diet from pulses, nuts, seeds, protein-rich grains, and non-dairy milk alternatives, nut milks, soya milks, etc. We do need fats in the diet. Depending on your goal, will depend on how much. If you're aiming to gain weight, then fats are helpful to do that. As I say, you do need energy. Calories are energy. Fats being number one can help that if you're trying to gain weight. If you're trying to lose weight, you might reduce those fats, use your exercise to burn calories and burn excess body fat, as Liz was talking about to start with on that body composition. Fats are helpful in that way. Fats aren't a very good source of energy for us when we're exercising though, so we don't need it in that sense. There has been studies where ultra-marathon, ultra-endurance sports have thought that you could use a super high fat diet to fuel energy. It's not very pleasant. 70% of diet food energy coming from fats isn't a nice way to eat. But what will happen is our body will, over longer periods of exercise, slow down its use of carbohydrates and also ramp up its use of fats within the body. One of the main reasons we really want fats, though, is to help absorb fatty acids, to help improve the structure of our cells, and the unsaturated fats are the ones we're aiming for, the healthy fats that often come from plant sources. So we'd be recommending people reduce dairy generally, and also choose lower fat versions, whilst keeping in balance the goals that we go for with calcium, but also reducing processed meats, focusing on leaner cuts of meat, and reducing fats from unnecessary sources, cakes, crisps, biscuits, those sorts of things. Onto fluids. We do need fluids as part of exercise. Fluids do help with exercise. If somebody's dehydrated, that doesn't help. So just generally staying hydrated across the day, drinking slowly, drinking regularly, sipping throughout exercise. You can lose a lot of fluid. It will depend from person to person on your sweat rate. You can work out how much sweat you lose. If you do some exercise, you can weigh yourself at the start, you can weigh yourself at the end. That's how much fluid you've lost. If you've drunk some in between, some fluid while you're doing your exercise, add that onto your weight, divide the amount of fluid in weight you've lost, so kilograms divided by how long you're exercising, you can work out your rate of loss per hour, and that can help them replenish that when you're doing some exercise. But definitely look out for signs of dehydration, cramps, fatigue, weakness, confusion and dizziness if it's quite extreme, cold clammy skin, but also cystic fibrosis causing thicker mucus. Getting thicker, sticker mucus again can be another sign. After the exercise, if you're going quite dark, or you've got a headache, you're likely to have not drunk enough across the day and replenished through that exercise. So just being aware of that. What people can tolerate will vary. Try things in training. If you're working up to any kind of competition or target, if you're just generally exercising, again, you can just try as you go along, but we'd recommend not drinking too much, drinking slowly, sipping, not having something that's heavy on your stomach. So we wouldn't recommend drinking milk if you're going for a run, but there are some things that we would recommend drink-wise, which hopefully I'll come on to in a second, but these are some general suggestions before I move on to that. Things like not relying on thirst. It's not a very good indicator of when we're dehydrated, but we're looking out for your urine colour. Is it straw coloured? And through the day, just generally sip fluids, drink water being the best thing. You can flavour that up to make it more interesting if you're happy with that. Going for something sugar-free generally is ideal. And what we'd recommend is if you're exercising in a low to moderate intensity for not very long, so less than an hour, water's fine to replace. If you're doing something that's a bit more vigorous, a bit more energetic, you're sweating more, or it's longer term, we'd recommend an isotonic drink. So what those are is drinks that've got a little bit of salt and a little bit of sugar, which make it easier to absorb. And you can make your own isotonic drinks at home as well, using a litre of water, 200 mils of full sugar squash this time, just to help get that balance, and a pinch of salt. And we do suggest, obviously, if depending on what your centres tell you about your salt chloride levels, sodium chloride levels, you may need to add more salt to your foods. You may not if things are fine. So it's really an individual thing nowadays.
Thanks, Darren. But just to follow on from that, just to sort of give an example of some of the kind of ways to balance the meal. So it's really just looking, and this is very similar to the general population advice. So it's really looking at those lean protein sources, and really the proportions will vary. But I think typically we're looking at quite a moderate section rather than a huge section of protein. And I think that was what Darren highlighted earlier on. It's the amount of protein that you need is not perhaps as high as I think sometimes is sold in the media. Just looking at carbohydrates, it's really important to try and include the whole grain varieties where possible of the complex carbs, such as things like the whole grain cereals, whole grain breads, pastas, which actually are better in terms of stabilising, so they're lower GI, low glycemic index, and actually help control blood sugar levels better as well. And then looking lower down at the dairy and alternatives, it's where possible using sort of unsaturated fat sources for longer term sort of cardiovascular health, and then fruit and vegetables form also something we're trying to encourage more. So these are very much, we're looking more at the nutrient quality of the diet, and that applies in exercise, but also all round now in CF, I would say. I'm just going to try and move on the slide. Sorry. And then just again, sometimes there are cases where when you do start exercise, I think if there is, particularly certainly in the clinic I work in, typically, particularly at the stages in childhood, I know during growth requirements, during puberty, when the demands are high for that rapid period of growth, it's sometimes there's a need to add additional calories to food to support weight gain, or if appetite perhaps isn't always so good. So these are ways just to sort of practically add fat and protein, particularly to the diet. And it doesn't necessarily increase the quantity of the food or drinks eaten, but actually just sort of enriches it. So it increases the nutritional value of the food that's being eaten. And these are just some sort of typical examples. And at the bottom, you can see a homemade fortified milk. Again, this is just literally using skimmed milk powder, dried skimmed milk powder, added to regular milk. And that's a very cheap way, rather than some of the expensive supplements that are available. And these are sometimes unnecessary, really, when appetite or intake isn't always so good, or if we're needing to support weight gain. And then this is taken from the information fact sheet that's available on the CF Trust website on nutrition for exercise, and it just gives some really handy nutrient-dense snack ideas for either pre or post exercise. And again, it just lists the sort of total sort of protein and carbohydrate contents, which I think for some people, particularly older children and adults, is really useful. And again, some of the things available on the go, like a cereal bar or dried fruit and nuts, they're things that you can have when you're out and about as well, if you're doing some sort of session at the gym perhaps, or meeting friends after a session or whatever. So it's just sort of things to sort of fit in that are quick and easy to have. And I think just a sort of word to say about prion or enzymes that you might be taking. If you are increasing your portion sizes or having additional snacks, it's always important to make sure you're covering your additional fat intake with adequate enzymes as well. So as Darren mentioned before about in terms of the nutrients, it's what to eat, but also when to eat as well. And I think that's really important in terms of when you're doing, depending on what time of day your exercise session is, it's really important to make sure you start off being well hydrated, particularly in those warmer months and in a hot environment if you're exercising in perhaps a hot sort of gym or something that's not very well air conditioned, for example, but I think or on a sort of sports pitch in the summer. So I think it's having a sort of balanced meal a couple of hours beforehand with a good sort of half a litre of fluids. And then just before or within sort of half an hour to an hour before doing your exercise, top up your energy levels with a sort of carbohydrate-based snack with some extra fluids. And then during exercise, it's just sipping fluids regularly just to keep your hydration, you keep yourself well hydrated. And then it's after exercise, as Darren has discussed, it's really that's when you need to replace the sort of nutrients in terms of protein as well as carbohydrate. And that's where the additional snacks can be helpful depending on where you are at the time. And then after that, it's having a regular balanced meal. So typically, it may be that 3 to 6 kind of regular meals and snacks per day is a sort of typical pattern that tends to work quite well. With the regular fluid intake to match as well. So I'll just hand back to Darren.
I'm going to try and fly through these last few slides. This one, pretty simply, is don't buy protein supplements unless it's for sheer convenience. Protein supplements are expensive. They're not necessary. I've already said with a well-planned meal plan, you can get away without those. Milk is a really brilliant sports drink in itself. It has a bit of salt, it has the carbohydrates, and it has a lot of protein. The last one of the slides Liz showed that's in the fact sheet, a pint of milk is around about 20 grams of protein. Add that dried skim milk powder, that's your protein supplement done. You can get that in if you need something. It's a handy drink to take to the gym if your goal is to build muscle. The evidence around sports supplements isn't very good. Caffeine is one of the only sports supplements that consistently gets good evidence, but you've got to use it sparingly. You can't let yourself become tolerant to it. And the second is creatine. We don't generally recommend creatine because it could have interactions with lots of other drugs, and there are implications for kidneys, especially as we know lots of the medications that people are on can cause a bit of damage to kidneys over time. So we don't recommend those. And I have mentioned already sports gels, the energy gels. They're good because they're lightweight, and they're generally well tolerated. So if you go in, if somebody's training for a marathon, long distance, long duration exercise, then it's quite helpful to have those. Touching on diabetes, everyone who has diabetes will have a very slightly different management plan. So speak to your team. In general, though, aerobic exercise, the sort of thing that gets you out of breath longer term, you do it in more moderate bursts for longer duration, tends to bring your blood sugars down. Things that are resistance-based exercise that's based on strength or very high intensity tends to bring your sugars up. You can use that to your advantage a little bit as well. If you're doing some exercise, at the end of it, do a 30-second all-out sprint burst, hit the punch bag, rowing machine, whatever that be, go all out. as long as you can manage that, and that can help protect you from hypos as well. Resources that we've mentioned throughout, the CF Trust fact sheet, your dietitians, exercise practitioners, physios. There are sports specialist dietitians you can approach. Be careful of sports social media, though they're not regulated. The BDA, the British Dietetic Association, have a nice double A-sided information leaflet as well, again with more food suggestions. And just for take-home messages, nothing really is different to people without CF. We don't know any extra difference. We do put the little top up on it of CF and the knowledge that we have as dietitians within that. Eat a wide variety of foods, aim for good nutrient-dense, nutrient quality foods. And what you'll need will depend on your goals, type of exercise and the intensity you're doing there. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Darren and Liz. That was very, very informative. And yeah, as I mentioned, we're going to be taking questions and things at the end. So if you do have any questions on your mind right now, do please pop them into the chat. And if we have time at the end, we will definitely answer them. So what we're going to do now is head on to our panel discussion. And we've just got 5 topics that were highlighted when you popped your questions in, when you signed up for the event. The first one we're going to talk about is the importance of your attitude to exercise and nutrition. And Kieran, I want to chat to you a little bit about that first, about what does exercise and nutrition play a part in your life and why is it important?
Yeah, thanks, Nicole. I think for me, I see cystic fibrosis as like a condition that's always like trying to get a foothold on your body and always trying to like take control. And what I can do is fight back as best possible. And what nutrition and exercise allows me to do is take back that control of my health, of my lung function, and everything on that side, really. So I know, like, when I'm exercising regularly, when my nutrition is optimized, I'm taking all of my medication, which is also really important, then I'm doing like absolutely everything I can to prolong my life, stay healthy, and feel my best, like physically and mentally. So yeah, for that reason, exercise is always going to be one of my #1 priorities in life. And likewise with nutrition, because if my nutrition's in a good spot, then I can fuel that exercise, I can recover well, I can build muscle, and I can push myself. So yeah, that's my relationship with nutrition.
Yeah, no, I have to agree with a lot of what you said. I always kind of see exercise and nutrition as this circle. You know, we always have to be promoting exercise, and then obviously we burn the calories and we want to get fit, and then obviously then have to replenish afterwards as well. And kind of, I always see it as a cycle. And that's kind of how I grew up with CF, and yeah, being promoted to do lots of exercise. I'm still very fit now and try and do as much as I can. But yeah, like you say, I think they go hand in hand. So if you're interested in exercise, then you should also maybe increase your knowledge in the nutrition side as well. So yeah, thank you for that. That was super interesting. We're going to move on now to our second topic, which is going to be meals and snacks for that pre and post exercise. I know we briefly mentioned it in that presentation, but yeah, to Liz and Darren, if you want to answer this question. We've had a few questions about the meals and snacks that provide fuel for exercise. And if you were able to give any examples of different types of nutrition that we need for exercise, and any specific examples of meals or those snacks that you mentioned that give us energy.
It's hard to put in something like this because it's so personal. What do we all like? It's taking the principles. That's the trouble. I think people want answers. You can't give a specific answer, because if we say eat toast and peanut butter every day after your exercise, you're going to get bored with that within the first couple of weeks. Some people you've got to have a variety. We do say variety. Variety is the spice of life. Base it on the principles: carbohydrate, some protein. If your goal is to build up weight, calories, so add a bit of fat to that somehow. Butter, if it's peanut butter, add the butter and the peanut butter. Have a pasta salad made up ready. It depends on your lifestyle preferences. It's hard to put into a quick, simple answer. Have you got anything you'd add to that?
No, I agree. I think it's really important to take into consideration what your preferences are, and I think you're right. You want the variety. I think that's the thing. I think sometimes it's about convenience quite often, depending on what else is going on in the family life as well. But I think sometimes it is easy to have the same thing each day or have that routine. But if it works, then yes, that's fine.
Yeah, no, very, very good answers. But actually as well, Kieran, obviously you might see it in a slightly different way. Obviously you were a long-term vegetarian and now you're vegan. What kind of meals and snacks are you kind of grabbing for at the moment that help you provide energy?
Yeah, so I always think the most important thing is your overall diet, and then obviously the pre and post is having for energy. But I think for my meals, I'm always looking to get a good balance in each meal. So a good protein source, good carbohydrate source, and then whatever else comes from fat. So just like my favorite meals, probably like bolognese, chili, stir fry, paella, just the standard stuff. The heaters, obviously, because I'm vegan, the protein source is going to be like tofu, vegan mince, things like that. And then in terms of snacks, like Darren was saying in his presentation, like if you're having a snack like an hour before a workout, you want it to be something that's quite fast digesting. So things like toast with jam, bananas, oat cakes, blackjack, even sometimes like sugary things can actually be quite good, like an hour before, just to try and get that quick, simple carbohydrate source. So in that respect, it's not too different to someone who is vegetarian or an omnivore. So yeah.
No, I do have to maybe other people might agree who are watching, but sometimes there is that kind of addiction to something. I love it, I'm going to eat loads of it, I love peanut butter, and then straight off it again. Like years ago for me it was fig rolls, loved fig rolls, ate loads of them, and then off again. So always good to have other things to try, and I want to start to bring in more nuts and maybe go back to avocados for a bit. But yeah, changing it up is really important. Great. So yeah, our next kind of topic again that was mentioned was meals and snacks to achieve a healthy weight. And I wanted to talk about how we can achieve that healthy weight to Liz and Darren, and what ideas do you have for nutrition to achieve that weight for you, and to achieve any exercise goals you may have. Do you want to answer that first, Darren?
Yes, I think one key is to keep in touch with your care team, really. They can help make that advice individualised. I know for people we work with in Nottingham, we've got a physio assistant who's a personal trainer by background. So when people are coming for whatever their goal is, whether that's to achieve a healthy weight by gaining weight or losing weight at the start, we'll do some measurement. He'll take some measurements, their exercise levels, but also their body composition. And based on that, we can make some specific advice for them, give them a personalised goal. That could be helping them to get a more balanced diet, having years and years of dietitians say loads and loads of fat, piling the calories, and then cafeteria comes along and it's much easier for some people to keep the weight, and then we're sort of helping find that balance again and teaching people what a healthy balance looks like, where the majority of our meals are based around vegetables and carbohydrates, again, which is a bit of a weird concept that we sort of have to help people understand.
Yeah, definitely.
Can I just add something to that? I think that's interesting, because I think there is a difference really with perhaps where we're at in when we're seeing the younger generations now. So very much in the clinics we're seeing children who we're educating really to have a healthy diet from the outset, and that is very different from 10, 20, 30 years ago. So that the kind of where we're at with people, it can be quite, again, it's so individualized. And I think particularly in our sort of, say, our under 10s, we're really promoting that healthy diet from the beginning, and therefore it's not necessarily about making changes, it's about continuing that.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the difference is between the adult and sort of children situation is really at the moment. But yeah, to maintain that good healthy trajectory throughout, really, because we know that we want to sort of increase longevity for, you know, as long as possible, really, and have a really good quality life as well, isn't it? So yeah, from the outset.
I guess one difference between both your roles is obviously with pediatrics, they're still growing at that time as well, and having to adjust things quite often, I guess. And I remember then moving to adult care and obviously things kind of flattening out a little bit, and then that's again maybe where the weight changes. And again, you mentioned Kaftrio there briefly, and again, just basically learning the changes of your body, I think is important.
I think for us, puberty is a real key time where we find that requirements really shoot up. And that can be really difficult to gain weight adequately sometimes, despite a really high intake. And then you add exercise on top. Yes. So the demands are really, really high. And I think it's incredible to know how, yeah, it's a huge amount, and it is sometimes really difficult to achieve just from diet alone. And that's where we often may recommend prescribable nutritional supplements, and they can be quite balanced. So they are maybe often milk-based products which actually have extra vitamins and minerals in, so they kind of top up what the diet is providing, but give they're age appropriate, so they are not too high or excess in any nutrient for that growing body. Yeah, for sure.
Great. And Kieran, if you wanted to add anything extra onto that about any personal ways that you achieve a healthy weight through exercise and through your nutrition.
Yeah, I think the really important thing if you're at a weight that you're happy with now is to just listen to your appetite, because when you do exercise more, you are going to get hungrier. Likewise, if you are not doing much activity, you're not doing much, you're probably not going to feel as hungry. So actually tuning into how you're actually feeling, your appetite signals is really important, I think, in my opinion. One thing I struggled with when I was younger was always like gaining muscle, so I was quite interested in trying to get bigger and gain muscle, because I was always really skinny, really low on digested food properly. And then so to do that, I focused on getting adequate protein, consuming like enough calories to match my energy demands, and then weight training as well, which I know we're going to talk about in a minute.
Yes. Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, good point. So yeah, moving on to a little bit more about the weight training and the protein. We've had a few questions whether people with CF need more protein than those people without CF. And again, same with when they want to do weight training, would they need to be taking more protein than someone without CF? Does anyone want to answer that question first?
I just wanted to comment really that I think at the moment, I think it's really important that people are starting, particularly in, well, from my perspective, from a paediatric perspective, just in that terms of looking at that growth. And actually the fact that their organs are, you know, it's a lot of load for their sort of organs, particularly the kidneys, the liver. And I think just really being open with this, with the team, their care team, so that we can support in the best way. While we're sort of finding out more information on this again.
Yeah, I have to say one of my own personal experiences again of like weight training and knowing about like the right things to eat. A lot of it is trial and error. I do have to say some people shouldn't stick to one thing, again, switching up what you're doing. But I loved that in the presentation you kept mentioning to be hydrated, and hydration is key. And quite often for me, it was actually that kind of drop after working out, especially when I did weight training and how much my body just was really tired. I personally had electrolytes and things I'd pop into my water that would help. And like you say, snacking afterwards, that kind of 30-minute window after is one way that I kind of found that it was really important to get food in me straight after exercise, so I didn't just want to go to bed and just be absolutely exhausted, because I do think sometimes your body is just telling you to rest, which again, you need to listen to your body. And yeah, Kieran, have you got any other experiences with your weight training?
Yeah, so when I was like 16, like I said, I was always really skinny, so I just wanted to get into that, and I think it's been like fantastic for my health, both physically and mentally. Like it gives you something to work towards. It keeps you active. Obviously, like Darren and Liz were saying, the benefits of resistance training, I think, are immense for people with CF. So yeah, I think it's a great thing for anyone with CF to get involved with. I'll be doing it for the rest of my life, I think, because I've recognised the benefits on my health and the impact it's had on me. And yeah, it's just amazing. Yeah, I recommend it.
And Darren, did you want to add anything else?
Yeah, I think following on actually from Kieran's point, actually wanting to do it for the rest of life, consistency is key. I think that's the thing I tell all of the people I see. Don't expect miracles. Don't expect things to change in the next 6 to 8 weeks, especially if your aim is to develop muscle. In the first 6 to 8 weeks, you will not see any muscle mass gain. It's all nervous changes. Your nervous system adapts. You've got to be consistent with your diet, your exercise, and the rest of the lifestyle. The protein, the diet around it, so long as it's okay, as the early stages, you'll be fine. Get to an elite level, we're talking a different language on things. But at the early stages, if you're just getting into things, keep it consistent, keep it fairly simple, and just try and find something you enjoy.
Yeah, exactly. And one thing I would say just briefly in terms of actual weight training is to not push yourself too far. Again, that's probably something to be really wary on, is to have a, if you're interested more into exercise and working out, then do get a good plan, again, because you don't want to injure yourself, just to mention. So yeah, we're gonna chat a little bit more now about salt and hydration. And I know that Liz and Darren mentioned a lot of useful tips through the presentation already. But more on a personal level, I didn't know, Kieran, if there was any tips that you had on staying hydrated before working out and then also after exercising.
Yeah, I think it's like what you said, Nicole, earlier, like you realise sometimes when you push yourself a bit further and you finish and you sort of drop. I think part of that comes down to salt intake. Like you start getting, I've experienced it where you start getting headaches, you feel quite low, and you just want to go to bed. And what I've realised over the years is you sort of get experience in when you need to take on some extra salt. Times where you perhaps don't. So, for example, me, when I do kickboxing, which is a sport I like doing, I sweat really heavily. So I know if I do an hour and a half of that, I'm probably going to have to take some extra salt on board. Maybe taking like a pinch of salt in my shake after the workout, or even like what you said you've done before, have electrolytes so that I can sit throughout that workout. And I've noticed when I do that, like my recovery is so much better. I'm not getting cramps, I'm not getting headaches. So I think it's about finding out what works for you personally and really trying to understand your body. And it can be a bit tricky, like when you start, because you don't know like how much salt you're going to have. There's not actually complete guidelines on it. Like Darren said, you can weigh yourself and work out how much water you're losing. You don't actually know how much salt we're losing. And especially with cardio now, I think it's some people it's potentially changing. So it's adapting again to how much salt you're losing during exercise. But yeah, I think for me, it's just getting used to my body, and then electrolytes, extra salt, eating salty foods around workouts sometimes. And then if I'm sweating like profusely, like massively sweating, then obviously we've got salt tablets, which can mitigate all the symptoms there. And then obviously water intake is so important as well, around working out and just in general, like making sure I'm always hydrated, and checking your urine colour, things like that.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I actually I learned again something this evening when Darren mentioned about protein, like shakes and all of those things again, because I do feel like it's quite a saturated market out there. And sometimes, again, if you don't know, you don't understand, you'll see something advertised or that sponsored ad on your Instagram story and you're hooked. And yeah, without knowledge or understanding, I do think, again, you can kind of be pulled into things that you're not aware of. So I have before, just gone to my personal dietitian and just said, is this actually what I need? Because sometimes you kind of read what it is and it might not actually work for you. So
just to add to that as well, Nicole, I think they're hugely expensive, some of these products as well, like costs So I think they attract people. There's certain drinks around on the market at the moment, and they claim to be sort of energy hydration drinks. They've got certain proteins added to them and certain coconut water, and they're all marketed, and people are taken in by that, the general population, and they're completely unnecessary, like we said on the slides, and best to be avoided, really. So we would advocate not to use those over the counter, particularly those protein powders, for example, or things that you can buy in the gym, the drinks machines. They're £3 or £4 per, I don't know, for one drink, and you can make your own kind of simpler versions. And I think, going back to your point about the salt and the hydration, I think that's a key thing that actually is often overlooked a little bit sometimes, and getting those kind of, I say the basics, but getting that kind of right for your body is really, really important, and helps performance, doesn't it, really, and then how you're feeling as well, sort of during and after. So those kind of things are just not to be forgotten, really, I think. Yeah.
Amazing.
And just, sorry, coming on to that a little bit on the expense and the media, the social media aspect of it. Liz and I have had a bit of a conversation about the new ones that have been advertised, Prime.
Yeah.
If we look at those, they've sold out. They're £2 a bottle, I think, if not more, being sold. And they are literally some water and electrolytes. Look at the ingredients list.
Yes.
They've essentially made somebody like KSI and Paul Logan a lot of money. You look at the boxing match at the weekend and how much Paul Logan earned from doing that. He's a media sensation and influence with lots of money and can use that influence.
Yeah. No, exactly. Yeah, I thought the same thing. Well, thank you all so much. They were like our main discussion points, but there has been some great questions in the comments, so I'm just gonna reel some off pretty quickly. But somebody's asked about their son playing a lot of cricket and football, and whether they should just be careful on how far you push the body. So when would you say too much exercise? When would you end up kind of making that a thought? Or again, I guess balancing the excess exercise with their nutrition.
Definitely, and I think also speak to the physio team about that, because that's very much, they can perhaps guide a little bit about mixing up the variety as well. I mean, it sounds great to do the balance of sort of those kind of football, cricket kind of sports if he's 15. I guess it's fitting everything in, isn't it? But I think physios would be probably the right people to just discuss in a bit more detail about that, really. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, and one thing I would say again is, yeah, just to again probably be aware of yeah, if you're ever getting too tired, I think that's really important. Sometimes exhaustion is the hardest bit to get over. So the next question again is in the chat from Lucy, and she says, someone with CF, I've previously been advised that I need a higher fat diet, particularly when she's unwell, and having that higher muscle mass than the average CFer. Do you need the same high fat diet? Would anybody like to answer that?
That will, I get, if the muscle mass is higher, then it's just maintaining that. It's going to be enough calories, enough to do that in the right amount of exercise. It will be balancing it. It'll be making tweaks to that to reduce that down. If it's achieving a healthy weight, which we keep talking about, and that's the sort of BMI goals being somewhere between 20 and 25, then yeah, possibly. It's quite an individualized question without knowing the specifics. But again, think about your BMI, what your goals are, and speak to your team about any specific individualized advice that would be helpful, I guess.
Yeah. Did you want to add anything else onto that, Liz?
No, I was just thinking from a sort of paediatric perspective. I think we know that sometimes the muscle and the fat stores can be a little bit on the lower side, and actually it's important to have an adequate of both, actually, particularly for growth, and that's from a children's perspective. But this could be from someone who's a little bit older, I think. So I guess it's, as Darren says, it's about that balance. So I think the needs are different for different ages. and also for sort of getting that ratios right for that individual person, which is why I think when we're looking at nutrition and assessing nutrition, when we can have those extra additional tools, for example, looking at some of those body composition sort of simple methods that we can add in at times, it can just add a bit more to that depth of what we can hopefully guide on as well, so what we can advise. Particularly when you're saying when you're perhaps starting something or changing diet or exercise regimes. Yeah.
No, great. And I just finally wanted to, it wasn't really a question, but Joanne said more about her granddaughter not being so keen on exercise. And again, this is something I just wanted to bring up, because sometimes it's hard that you have CF, that means you must like exercise and you have to keep doing something. And I've had a couple of friends with CF that have really struggled with their physiotherapy because it's just not what they're interested in, and kind of being pushed to go swimming or pushed to go running just to keep their exercise up. But one thing I would say on that is there are many other ways to work out, not just by kind of going to the gym and doing PE at school. And yeah, I just wanted to kind of say that you're not alone with that. And even things like going for walks is still a type of exercise, or watching, again, I think it says she likes things like YouTube. So again, there's like YouTube dance tutorials if they're interested in dancing. Again, you said that, but yeah, and like home workouts, there's lots of medium or high intensity HIIT sessions on the internet. So yeah, I think just being a lot more open, maybe with showing other things that are out there, because I know it's hard when you kind of have to bring the CF and the exercise together when sometimes it isn't naturally there.
I agree with you, Nicole, and I think just from our clinics, and again, just from hearing what the physios advise, typically it's about making it fun and
yes,
in part of your daily sort of activities. It doesn't have to be structured. It can be, as you say, going for a walk or playing in the park or doing things that you can join in as a family perhaps, or your other grandchildren or whatever it might be in the family, so that it doesn't seem like it's something that's just the name exercise. If it's sort of something that she's a little bit, I can see exercise resistant, it says in the chat, but making it really fun. So I think that's the important thing, and then they are more likely to continue to want to do that as they get a little bit older as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. Did you want to add anything else onto that? Yeah, go on.
I was just going to say, I've done a talk to physios similar to this before, obviously more detail, but I substituted the word exercise for physical activity and physical inactivity. And we think about the obesity problem that's happening outside of CF, that lots of people are becoming overweight and obese, and exercise isn't something that lots of people enjoy. It's just being less physically inactive, doing things. I think 60 years ago, before we had nice appliances like washing machines, tumble dryers, dishwashers, buses, cars, we'd been much more active in our daily lives, and that's I think something people should probably aspire to, rather than just being encouraged to exercise too much.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much for everyone who has given a question, and hopefully we've answered it to the best of our abilities today. And as we said, if you have any other questions, then obviously do go to your specific dietitians and any of your diabetes teams if it's about that as well. But just to have some closing comments now, just to say firstly a massive thank you to obviously our panelists and our speakers today. It's been lovely to chat with the three of you, and I hope again everyone's found this useful. I've again learned so much today as well, so you can never not know everything. And as I said, we'll be sharing a short feedback survey after the event as well. So when we finish recording, if you wouldn't mind filling that out as well, and it will help us improve all of our future events that we do. We do have other events coming up in the nutrition series. We've got some mindful eating and gut health as well, and these dates are to be confirmed. So just keep an eye out on our social media and on our website and our newsletter as well. And there'll be more coming throughout the year. If you do have the urge to get active, then yeah, Team CF needs you. And if you haven't heard of Great Strides, then do give it a look. It's an amazing hiking event. And if you're feeling inspired after this, you might be interested. And as I say, there's a bit of a discount there at the moment. But yeah, you can know more about Great Strides via our website.